I'm not sure what to do with this Atlantic article, so I want your thoughts on it, okay? Here's how it begins.
Sure.
Perhaps you've heard, Americans are having fewer children on average than they used to.
Mm-hmm.
And that has some people concerned.
Right.
Okay.
We've discussed.
In the future, the elderly could outnumber the young. This is happening in Japan, by the way, leaving not enough workers to pay taxes and fill jobs. Kids already have fewer siblings to grow up with, and parents have fewer kids to care for them as they age.
Mm-hmm.
How are we doing so far?
Yes, all things we've discussed.
If you rule out immigration, if you're just saying,
Correct.
Us Americans only, and not future Americans who follow the pathway to citizenship.
Right. Yes. Like the current trend in most Western nations, in particular ours now, is it's a declining birth rate. And that's people nervous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, the only way at some point that you can reverse that is immigration.
Right.
And so there's a problem there, right? And Christians think about this. We've talked about how to have kids. The writer of the article says this. Oh, and people are having fewer cousins. But who's talking about that?
Well, I feel like that's just kind of obvious. Like if there's less kids, there's less cousins. Right?
Right.
It's just kind of like that's the logical thinking that comes next.
Yeah, but I don't think I've heard anyone like expressly call this out as something that kids might be missing.
Now, cousins have historically had a vital family role. For centuries, extended kin depended on one another, for example, to run a farm or a business or to relay information. But the typical family experience is changing. Some researchers say that American family trees are turning into beanstalks, tall and narrow. People are more likely to have multiple generations of relatives alive at the same time because of longer life expectancy, but fewer lateral relationships.
Right.
Like cousins and siblings because of the decreased fertility rate. And this writer views the cousin decline as a problem.
I could see that.
You don't seem convinced, ladies.
No, I think it could be. I think there's great value to having strong relationships with extended family that last into adulthood.
And Dara, you have lots of cousins, right?
I do. Both my parents come from very large families. So on one side, I think I've got like 20 first and second cousins.
Okay. Yeah. And what about the other side?
I don't even know on the other side. My
As in there's so many you've lost count?
my mom's father is one of 8.
Okay.
I don't know how many of them there are.
So how connected are you to your first and second cousins?
As kids, we were very, very close. There were 3 in particular. We all kind of hung out. They were a little bit older than me. And then they went to college, and then we grew apart because, again, they were several years older than me. Now 2 of them live far away, and they have families, and we've kind of lost touch. And then there's another one that's still kind of local, but we haven't spoken in a really long time.
So it's drifting as you get older.
Yes.
Now, you are, I think, the exception. That's a lot of... So you have more than we're really even certain.
Right, yeah. And then my dad is the youngest of 5, so all his siblings have multiple children.
How many cousins do you have, Lauren?
4 on one side, 2 on the other.
Super close?
Growing up, we were like Daria. We were the ones that always lived far away.
Oh.
We were the ones, so we would travel back to where they all lived for holidays and stuff like that, but not as much as anymore as we've grown up.
Are you in communication with cousins?
Like on social media and stuff like that, or for birthdays, but
But you're not like getting together?
no.
Okay. Ron?
My mom was an only child. My dad had 1 brother. So we only had first cousins on that side. And we had 3 of them. Growing up, again, very close. As we've aged, not so much. But trying to reestablish that.
You are trying to reestablish that?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I like my cousins, and it's just been a matter of, having kids. You've got so much to do in your life, and they pull you different directions. And now all of our kids on both sides are out of the house. So we try to get together with Bill and Carol and make up excuses why we do that. A lot of times it's when one of the kids from, one of the families comes home, so we can say, hey, we're having an open house. Why don't you come on over? Or they're having an open house, either way.
As this writer, I don't think it's the Faith Hill, but Faith Hill wrote this for The Atlantic. I'm just noticing that. Wow. Okay. She says, whether she's a star or not, within many families, and I'm sorry to say this, cousins occupy a weird place. Some people are deeply close to theirs, but others see them as strangers. Some cousins live on the same block. Some live on opposite sides of the world. That can all be true about any family relationship, but when it comes to this one, the spectrum stretches especially far. Despite being related by blood and commonly in the same generation, cousins can end up with completely different upbringings, class backgrounds, values, and interests. And yet, they share something rare and invaluable. They know what it's like to be part of the same particular family.
Mm-hmm.
They do occupy a weird space, don't they?
Yeah.
Do any of you, in a sense, kind of long for a deeper relationship that doesn't exist? Ron, you kind of hinted at that.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like you're missing something, ladies?
My husband Eddie, him and his cousins are very close. They all grew up in Chicago together. They were like extended siblings, basically, and they're still very close to this day. Like they're all on a family group chat together that texts all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I still had that with my cousins. We just were never in proximity to each other.
What keeps you from rekindling it, though?
I think the problem is the proximity. We're not in the same place, and we've never been in the same place.
Yeah, and this person's historic point, I mean, for many years, right, nobody ever left their hometown. And so, you're near your cousins all the time.
Sure.
And you relied on your cousins. So, like, family units were so much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And people have talked about family units shrinking and familial relationships. We talked about, like, the struggle of adult relationships with your adult children, right? But, I mean, in some sense, Faith Hill here is right. No one's talking about the lack of cousins. To what extent does this matter? We're talking about an article from The Atlantic. I think that's pretty thought-provoking. I'm not quite sure what to do with it yet, but it's called The Great Cousin Decline. And this person is saying, in modern life, cousins occupy a strange place in your life. But they do still have a unique position in that they're one of the only other people that uniquely understand what it's like to be in your family.
Mm-hmm.
And and for some, how uniquely dysfunctional it may be.
Right.
And as our population shrinks and the birth rate shrinks, we're all having fewer and fewer cousins.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my story is very similar to yours, Ron, in that my mom was an only child, adopted at that, and my father had one brother, right? And if you're not familiar, maybe you're newer to us, I did a whole podcast series a couple of years ago called The Grandfather Effect, where I tried to figure out why there was a breakdown in some of these family relationships. I inadvertently discovered a rift between my dad and his brother. And I'm not talking out of school here. It's in a whole series.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a wonderful time with my cousins. You hear this, just like wonderful breakfast.
Yeah.
They're fabulous women. They played an important part in that project. And yet I can tell you, we really don't have a relationship. Here's the oddity of it. I've always had this curiosity because of the small size of my family. My paternal grandmother died before I was born. My paternal grandfather disowned us.
Mm-hmm.
My maternal grandfather was really not a very nice person. And so I really only had one grandma and no cousins to speak of. So I kind of pined for this. In high school, I convinced my brother somehow, who didn't like me very much at the time, that I myself arranged a get-together in high school to go out to dinner with my two cousins, Nicole and Kelly. And we arranged it. We hadn't seen them in years. We went, and the whole intention was, I said over dinner, as a high school kid, who does this? I was like probably 16, 17 years old.
Literally you.
Just me.
It tracks.
Yep.
Just me.
Yeah,
And
you would do that.
I wanted to ask questions about our grandfather. I wanted to know more about our families, and I wanted to be like, this is so weird. We don't know each other. I really would like to know you guys. And both of my cousins and my brother, I think, all thought that was pretty weird. And we didn't speak again until our weddings. They showed up at our wedding, said hello, and then I interviewed them for the podcast. And then we're like, I really wish we could see each other more, and they're just not interested. So I don't know what you do with that, but I do feel like I'm missing something.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know quite what it is. Daria, you've got a lot of cousins, but Do you feel like you're missing something without deeper relationship with at least some of them?
Yeah, I remember specifically realizing that we were growing apart. I was probably late into high school because one of them had just gotten married. The other one was also one lives in Missouri and the other one lives in Texas now. So I hardly see these two, and that was quite upsetting. Realizing that I was losing a part of that because we were really, really close growing up, and then there's another one that is closer to me in age that, for no reason in particular, we have just really grown apart, and it does make me sad. And I've to one in particular, I've reached out a couple times to try to get together, and things just haven't worked out because we're both busy, that kind of thing. But I really do miss those days when we would run around in my grandma's backyard or play board games. Those are really cherished memories for me.
And I haven't quite figured out like why, because it's not just a Brian or Daria problem. It's like our culture is one where it's just there's not a lot of closeness. Now, I don't think that's common around the world per se. There's a lot of, as our friend Janelle taught us, there's a lot of Latin American families who are very close with siblings and extended families. I think in the Middle East, that's the case, very much so. It's not here. Biblically, you look at families in Scripture, and yeah, of course, some of it was a function of the era in which people lived
Right.
thousands of years ago, but still, there was some distinct closeness.
Yeah, we've become pretty individualistic, and that even goes as far as like my individual family,
Yeah.
my
even
spouse
with-
and my
yeah.
kids. And just like everything revolves around that and not like casting a wider net to your wider family.
So what do we lose? We all feel like, oh, we've lost something. We're missing something in life, but what is it?
I think it's just kind of like a part of being known. It's someone who knows a part of you that nobody else knows or experiences. It's someone who has the same grandparents as you, has the same aunts as you.
It's
Yeah.
built-in friends when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and Lauren and I were chatting off the air about that. Yeah, it's a lot of parents, I think, pine for this, and they try to orchestrate it. Like you said, you spent a lot of time with your cousins as a kid.
Yeah, I did. And then I think what was the breakdown of a lot of these relationships, besides two moving really far away, was my grandma died when I was 15. And we were all extremely close-knit when she was alive. And then we kind of just got out of the habit because she wasn't around for us to all visit. So we've all just grown apart. She was kind of the glue that held us together. And we do still get together on like Thanksgiving, but it's not the same.
Yeah, I relate to that.
Do you?
Yeah, when my grandmother also passed away when I was 15. And we were all going to her house to do things. My grandpa's, her husband is still alive. He's just not as warm and fuzzy as she was, and not as hosting and welcoming and wanting people in his space. He doesn't want people in his space. and that's, just gotten more so as, he's gotten older. He's 90 now. So I think that, that is a part of it where it's like she was kind of the one inviting people in and bringing people in. And once she passed away, we were like, well, we're not all going as much anymore.
And I interestingly enough, of course, my story is very similar. When I met my dad's cousin for the first time, was in his 80s. It turns out he lives like 10 minutes from my parents. And he said when my grandmother passed away, the whole family got disconnected. That generation, were they the last ones to keep family ties, extended relationships together?
Seems like it. And it all hubbed around the woman, the grandmother. Seems like
And that generation of grandmother.
Yeah. The grandfathers, mine was the same way. He was glad, if we wanted to go down and visit him.
Totally.
But it wasn't like he was going to make a big deal. Oh, come
Yeah.
see me. His later years, he lived in a extension of my folks' house. And so we could see him a little more then. But then also you're caught up with your own young children and doing all the things of that. So your time is more limited.
Yeah, and I wonder if we even lose a sense, and a really important, in a spiritual sense, the idea of being a part of a larger community.
Mm-hmm.
Like so much of what's lost in the modern American church is the idea of how necessary community is for spiritual growth. And being a part of a group that you're committed to through thick and thin.
Mm-hmm.
And we lose that idea that we're part of a larger community. We've almost reduced the family in America to, to each their own. Pull up your bootstraps and take care of your own. I'm just going to worry about mine. You worry about yours. See ya. No one says that, but I'm just really sad about it. I feel like because individualism is not a Christian ethic in any sense.
No.
It's the opposite of it. And it's slowly deteriorating, I think, our sense of what it truly means to be part of Christian community when we can't even develop a vibrant community in our own families. Because I've tried as well. Like my brother and I and my parents, we try to connect our children, but time and culture and distance, no matter how many times we get together, there's just not a closeness with cousins.
And the cousins, I think, provide an early sense of unconditional love outside of your parents because you're raised like my cousins. We were raised together so much from the very beginning. You know, the older ones knew younger ones as the babies, you know. So there was that sense of love outside of your immediate family that they were happy to come over and play, and you did all those embarrassing things together that you knew each other's secrets.
There's some scary videos out there of me and my cousins. It was like someone always got like a video camera for Christmas.
Yeah.
And you have to use it immediately. And you
Of
have to
course.
and you have to do dumb stuff.
It was a big deal back then.
Oh, yeah.
People still do dumb stuff for cameras now.
Yeah,
They're
they
just smaller.
post it.
Yeah.
My cousins, Nicole and Kelly, were the first ones to get me with the classic joke, "Hey, what's that under there?" And you go, "Underwear." They were the first ones to get me, and it was like I have a vivid memory of this. I told them about that, actually. And I don't know if it made the cut for the podcast series, but I told them. Yeah, how do we fix it? Is there a way to fix this?
You have to be conscientious about it.
I think when you have young families, you have to be like, you as the parents have to make it work. Like you with your sibling. Like me and my sister have to be the ones to forge that relationship for our kids for when they're older.
But still, it's up to them.
Yeah, when they're older, yeah. I mean, that's how all relationships are.
It is, but you just have to hope and pray that you have instilled those values in them and that they will pick them up themselves. And you also have to remember that people are different. I grew up with 20 plus cousins. There are going to be different personalities and people that are just, I'm not interested in this family thing. It happens.
And that's okay, of course. I mean, you can't force community or relationship when people don't want it. But, yeah, I don't know. I hate to be cynical and defeatist, but the American dream runs antithetical to family closeness.
Yeah.
It can.
And it takes concerted effort to say, no, I'm not going to join this idea that the ideal is, a white picket fence.
My 2 kids, my 2.5 kids.
Yeah, and a big house and a great job and tons of money. It just can't be it. But anyway, that's Brian's lament along with Faith Hill. We're not sure if it's the Faith Hill.
Doubt. I highly doubt.
If it is, she should write a song.
What was one of her big...
Just breathe, please.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, that's what I really need to do right now. Just breathe.